We are going to be talking about the disciplinary core ideas today. These are the content pieces of our standards, and they can be the hardest thing to decipher exactly what you're supposed to be teaching. So I'm going to share a few tools today, and so I hope for the high school teachers who are teaching brand new standards that this will be a tool to help you figure out what content to be teaching. And for middle school teachers, I hope you have a minute to go and look at the DCIs you're supposed to be teaching. I know that for me, after teaching the new standards for a couple of years, when I went back and actually looked at the DCIs, I realized I had been teaching some things I shouldn't have been, and I also was missing some things that I should have been teaching. So I just want to give everybody a few tools that you can use to know what content you should be teaching. So I'm actually going to go to physics. So I'm just on the district science website, and it doesn't matter which grade or subject you teach, all of the tools that I'm going to be showing you using physics are in the same places on your own page. So we're going to start by just looking at the standards themselves. So when we look at the standards, you'll notice there's some formatting. So there's a piece that is in bold in each standard, and there is something that is underlined in each standard. And then there's a bunch of stuff that's just is in a normal font. So the things that are in bold, these are our science and engineering practices. So these are things like modeling. So the last couple of weeks, I've shared some modeling resources. So these are things that scientists do. The pieces that are underlined, these are the cross-cutting concepts. These are lenses that we can use to think scientifically about a problem. And then the last part of the standard is the content piece. And this is the piece that when we just look at the standard can be a little bit muddy about what you're actually supposed to be teaching. So if you look at each standard, at the end, there is a little code. And this is the code that tells us that we can use to figure out what content we should be teaching. These originally were missing from the middle school standards. So they just added these to the middle school standards when they wrote the new high school standards. So for middle school teachers, if you are using a printed copy of the standards, that from when they first came out, I would suggest printing a new copy or using an electronic copy that has these codes. So these codes correlate to a disciplinary core idea, and there are a couple of places you can find that. So one place is on your curriculum map. So we went and added the core ideas to the curriculum map. So when you open your map, each standard is broken down into its 3 dimensions. And so you can see, so here's the physics map. So we can see the practice is analyzing and interpreting data. That's easy to find anyway because it's always in bold. The cross-cutting concept for this one is systems and system models, and that one is the one that's underlined. And then the DCI is the one that has these codes. So this again is our content piece. So we just copied and pasted the content piece here. So this piece is for teachers. It's written for teachers, but these are the main ideas that your students should be learning with this standard. So this is the first place that you can go to help define what content we should be teaching. The next resource that I would suggest looking at is this DCI progression matrix. So this was put together by NSTA. It's based on NGSS. And one of the nice things about this is that it gives me the progression from kindergarten to 12th grade for each of the core ideas. So most of the core ideas get hit in every single grade band. And so this matrix is helpful for me as a teacher in knowing what my students should have learned in the past, and also for middle school teachers knowing what they are supposed to learn in high school so that I'm not stepping on the high school teacher's toes. So for the physics standards, so if we look at the standard, let's look at 2.2. So the disciplinary core idea is PS3B. If I go to my matrix, The physical sciences are in blue and they are near the end. So I'm just going to look for PS3B along the side, and it's right here. And so I can use this if I am middle school. I can see that this is what I should be teaching. I can see what they should have been exposed to in elementary school. And I can also look and see where they're going in high school. And for high school teachers, you can see what they were learning in middle school. A lot of times this is a great starting place if you want to do a formative assessment at the beginning of a unit to see what do they actually remember from middle school. Some of these things they may have learned in sixth grade. And so if you're teaching juniors or seniors, it may have been a while, but hopefully that gives you a starting place for what your students at least have been exposed to. The other resource that I want to share that is helpful in figuring out what the core ideas are that we should be teaching is Paul Anderson's site. So I know a lot of you know about the wonder of science. There are a lot of really great teaching resources here. On his disciplinary core idea page, he has links to each of the core ideas, and he has taken all the information from the framework, which is the document that our standards are based on, and he's separated them out, and he's also included a video of himself explaining the core idea. So I think we were looking at PS3B. So this is a summary of the matrix that we just looked at. And then he has two things that come from the framework. So one is the grade band endpoints. So the matrix that we were just looking at comes from this. The matrix is a summary of all of this. So this goes into a little more detail about what students are supposed to learn in each grade band. And then there's also just an outline of the core idea here. And then he has made a video for every single core idea where he outlines the ideas, and he also goes through each grade band and talks about what students should be learning in each grade band. These are really great to know what you should be teaching, but then also if you've been assigned a course that maybe you haven't taught before and you actually need to learn some of the core ideas, this is a great resource. These are teacher-facing videos. They're not meant for students. They're meant for teachers who are trying to understand the standards better. So those are some resources for better understanding the core ideas that we are supposed to be teaching. But knowing the core ideas can also come in really handy when you are planning. So these standards are really robust, and for most courses, there is no way that you could really get in depth in all of these standards over the course of a single school year. And so knowing which core ideas are addressed in each standard can make planning a little bit easier. So one thing that I would suggest as you're planning is to look at the core ideas, and they can be a great starting place in figuring out which standards have a lot of overlap. And then you can decide if you want to bundle those standards together, and maybe you just teach them together and assess them together instead of trying to teach them separately. Or maybe when you see standards with a lot of overlap, you can pick one standard that is going to be your main standard and you teach that standard. And the other standard, you don't teach a full unit on, but you pick up whatever small pieces may be in that standard that are not in your major standard, so that you can spend more time on a few standards but still address everything. So the core ideas can be handy also in planning. So I hope that these resources come in helpful as you are unpacking your standards and looking at what you're teaching, and especially this year as we have reduced instructional time. I hope that this is a way for you to really look at what you're teaching and cut out any content that you don't really need to be teaching.